one, I didn't agree to or consent to it being, well, I was still confused about why did there even need to be a jury view. That was my whole thing. I don't see the relevancy of it. And I also didn't agree with or consent to having to be part of something that I don't see as relevant.
This is Darrell Brooks Jr. to a T. A, he doesn't understand the relevancy of the jury, the triers of fact, seeing the vehicle that he used in the Waukesha Christmas Parade massacre, because to me it was a massacre. B, he thinks that by objecting, that he can stop the jury from seeing it. What's going on, everyone? You're watching Everything Else Channel on YouTube, everythingelschannel.com. If you have not subscribed to the channel, what are you waiting for? Please subscribe, ring the bell for notifications so you won't miss a single video. Also, please, 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 if you like the video, smash that like button and leave a comment down below. So, his idea of relevancy is really warped, and we see it throughout the trial. And here, I don't know if he was acting or if he truly didn't think that the SUV was relevant. I'm hoping that it's the latter and not the former, because he's so warped that if he doesn't see the relevancy, then he really clearly doesn't know what he is talking about. But the fact is that the judge, I feel, during the exchange, and we're only showing you a very small clip, but during this exchange, it goes on minutes, the judge falls into the trap of having to explain things to him, and she doesn't have to do that. So it's just one of those things where I think she went above and beyond the Call of Duty. I think she was just an amazing judge. A lot of people give me grief because they said, well, you can't say that because you gave Judge Darrell a 97, as if a 97 is a bad score. A 97 is an A+, or at least an A, right? Because I think an A+ is 100. Okay, so it's not an A+, but it's an A. The thing about it, though, is that he didn't understand procedure. He didn't understand chain of evidence. He didn't understand what was relevant, what wasn't, what was biased, what wasn't. He didn't understand a lot of that. And I think that even though that he said many a times, he said, Your Honor, I'm not asking you to explain to anything to me or advise me, but if I don't understand, how can this proceed? And so, it is an example of a guy talking out of both sides of his mouth, basically, because on the one hand, he's like, look, I can do this on my own. I'm pro pauper, not pro se. I'm a third party litigant or whatever he said. But at the other time, he wanted the judge to really just dumb everything down for him and explain to him the inner workings of the judicial system, how to interpret cases, what, was accurate, what wasn't. When we see him whine later in another clip about why he forfeited his right to testify, he expects the judge to almost have been his paralegal in a way, you know what I mean? Like, almost like she had to remind him when to do memos, when, to introduce witnesses, when not to, when to object, what to object to, and again, honestly, it's one of those things where, I almost don't think the judge should have let him represent himself, but that's his right. She can't not let him represent himself if he's competent. But again, that whole realm of competency is just so vague, because he's competent in the sense that he's not insane, but he's not competent in the sense that he's never practiced law. He doesn't know the first thing about, trying a case. And so a lot of the times, he was lashing out at the court, lashing out at the prosecution, lashing out at court staff because of the fact that he did not know what he was doing, but yet he was allowed to do the work essentially of a pro se litigant to defend himself. And, a lot of the times he was in another courtroom and he didn't understand what was going on, because he himself was a reason why he was taken to that other courtroom. And again, the jury view to him, I think, was one of those instances where the jury was going to see the vehicle and then they were going to look at him. And even though he wasn't going to be in prison attire, and even though they were going to do their best to make the Sally Port of the court look like, it was not part of a prison, it was not part of a jail, it was not part of a holding cell or anything like that, I think that he knew that at that point in time, the jury was going to make the connection. And it's one of those things where I think he didn't want the jurors to see that, because it's one thing to see the SUV on a video or in pictures. It's another thing to actually do a full 360 and walk around it and sort of assess it visually. I think that we're dealing with a person who honestly felt on some level that he was going to be able to be exonerated, that he was going to be able to walk out based on some sovereign citizen nonsense, perhaps, or based on, excluding evidence, or maybe challenging, how the case was being run. Example, subject matter jurisdiction. Example, where is the plaintiff? Example, many, many more instances of this sovereign citizen mumbo jumbo that ultimately I think he thought was going to be able to have some sort of a loophole effect where either he was going to get a new trial or the charges were going to be dismissed. I think that he was getting, I think he was partaking of the Kool-Aid there a little bit, because I think he was really like losing his mind. And I think that we see that at the very beginning, we see that towards the middle, we see that towards the end. One of the consistent things about this trial is his warped sense of justice. And again, the idea that he would be able to stop the jury from doing a full inspection of the vehicle by him merely objecting or not being present is asinine. But again, you're dealing with an individual who honestly, by firing his court-appointed attorneys, was essentially alone. And I don't know if at any point in time he regretted that decision. I would venture to say that he regretted it maybe just a few minutes after he did it. You know what I mean? But I think pride got the best of him, and I think that he wanted to torment Erica. He wanted to torment some of the witnesses. I know for sure he hated Nicholas Kirby, and I know that he wanted to try to push his buttons. I know that he was probably trying to push the buttons of the police officers that initially interrogated him, because maybe he felt like they betrayed him on some level. Maybe he thought that there was like some common ground. I don't know what it was, but I know that his pride was a catalyst for him firing those two attorneys. And his pride ultimately cost him, the sentence that he got. But even if he had kept those two original attorneys, I believe that he still would have, been found guilty, and he still would have done hundreds of years, and he never would have been able to get out of prison. But again, who knows what those fine attorneys would have been able to accomplish. And they were fine attorneys because, as you can see, absolutely every page, every question that he read was written by them. There was very little, in my opinion, that he actually wrote or researched. And what he did write and research got shot down, consistently by the court, and was objected to successfully by prosecution team. So again, those lawyers were definitely very, very good. And I'm sure that they, behind closed doors probably, strongly admonished Darrell not to fire them, to at least leave them there to assist. But again, I think that Darrell, we just go back to the whole warped sense of the trial, and why I think this trial is so addictive to so many people, because we're dealing with an individual that really thought that he was going to walk out of there an innocent man, and it was going to do it based on, these sovereign citizen theories. And he thought that the angrier that the court got and the more flustered the prosecution got, because again, they were scratching their heads largely because none of that means anything. The objections, the cases that he cited, none of it means a darn thing. And the reality of the matter is that, objecting to the jury view is probably right on top of those just outrageous objections. And the fact that he thought that it wasn't relevant is just par for the course at this point, because, to say that the SUV, the weapon in reality that he used during the Waukesha Christmas Parade massacre, it not being relevant, I mean, it is probably the most relevant exhibit of all. But for him to say that it's not relevant, and you could see him in his face, he's like, it looks like he's actually like trying to like run a million different scenarios through his head as to where it could be relevant, and he can't. He's coming up, with nothing, and so he's just like incredulous, like, but I don't even understand how this is relevant. That's got to be acting. He could not possibly be that warped. But I leave it to you. I mean, maybe he was. To me, it was just really bad acting. But there was a lot of really bad acting throughout the trial. And sometimes I felt like it wasn't acting. Sometimes I really felt like he thought he was going to get off. And people often ask me, why is this trial so addictive to so many people? And I would say it's because of things like this. Saying that the SUV in question, the jury view, is not relevant, would be why this trial is so popular. And a judge having to explain to him that he cannot stop the jury from seeing it just because he objects, or just because he won't be there, or just because he doesn't give them permission to. I mean, it may be why this trial is so addictive. What say you? Did he really believe he could stop the jury view from happening, or was this just Darrell Brooks being Darrell Brooks Jr.?